right, I would like to introduce some of the Mom Stop the Harm staff and founders. So if you could take a moment, unmute and just say hi. Petra Schulz, who is a co-founder of Mom Stop the Harm.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Or afternoon, wherever you are.
Leslie McBain, can you unmute and say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm a co-founder of Mom Stop the Harm. I lost my son in 2014 to a drug overdose, and have worked with Petra and lots of women here ever since to advocate for better and compassionate drug policies for people who use drugs. I also work for the BC Centre on Substance Use as the family engagement lead. That's it.
Thanks, Leslie. And Lorna Thomas, who's also a co-founder. Lorna, if you could unmute and say hi.
Hi, good morning. I'm here in Edmonton and really looking forward to this talk. And thank you to everybody who made this happen.
Thank you. And Jennifer Howard, who's the Mom Stop the Harm program manager and Healing Hearts coordinator for BC.
Hi, great to see everyone. It's a wonderful turnout. Thank you, David. Looking forward to this today.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Tyler Savard, who's the Stronger Together Canada program manager.
Hey everyone! As always, it's always such a good feeling when we all get together and can share information and just going forward. So it's great to see everyone.
Thank you. And Corinne Antrobus, Holding Hope coordinator for BC.
Hi, everybody, and it's nice to see everybody's faces and names that I know, and looking forward to David's presentation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Corinne. So what the format is we're going to be, David's going to share his story, and then we're going to be taking some questions. We would ask people to please put your questions in the chat because we are quite a robust group. And so we'll have the questions go in the chat. So even as David's talking, if something, bubbles up for you, please feel free to put it in. Tyler's going to monitor our questions and bring them forward when David pauses for a minute to say any questions. And at the end, we are going to be doing a draw for one of David's books for all of those who stick around to the very end. And also at the end, if anybody on here is interested in finding out about Holding Hope groups or becoming a Holding Hope facilitator in your areas, please stay on and we can help you with providing that information. So I'm going to hand it over to Petra, who's going to talk about the Holding Hope groups and introduce David. Take it away, Petra.
Thank you, Antoinette, and thank you, everybody. I think this is a fantastic turnout today and shows the interest. And I know many people here have already read David's book. Others look forward to reading the book and learning more about David's life. This is the first of a series of presentations that we call Holding Hope Connect. And they're intended to bring speakers that are relevant to our Holding Hope groups and also to introduce our Holding Hope groups to a wider audience. And also, of course, we are hoping that there might be people among us who would want to join a group or become a facilitator. Holding Hope is a project of Stronger Together. We have a Stronger Together BC and Stronger Together Canada. So we have groups across the country. We have a Holding Hope website. Maybe Jenny can put that in the chat, the link. And there you can see where we have group. But Holding Hope it was started in Victoria, BC, and Corinne is actually one of the members of the original Holding Hope groups, where people who have loved ones living with problematic use or in recovery get together to support each other in a compassionate but evidence-based format. And really the focus is on support and lots of love without the tough. And also to inform people about harm reduction, about evidence-based treatment approaches, and giving people a safe place to share the situation that they're facing. These Holding Hope groups and our entire Stronger Together projects are generously funded in BC by the BC government, and our funding for the rest of the country, or how Jennifer Howard, I'll never let you get away with it, how Jennifer Howard likes to call it, Eastern Canada, east of the BC border, are funded through Health Canada. So with this funding, we are able, all groups are peer-led by volunteers, but what our projects provide, we recruit the facilitators, we train and ongoingly support the facilitators, and then there's also funding available for ongoing training and some expenses that might come with the groups. So we have, it's so important through the ravages of the drug poisoning crisis that just has been exacerbated by COVID. We have seen people join us like never before. And what is being so tragic as well, that we have lost people who've been long-time experienced users, and how David said earlier, how hard it's become to really know what's in substances. And so we have people switching from a Holding Hope to a Healing Heart group, which is, it's beyond words. The heartbreak is beyond words. And we have to be strong as advocates. And not everybody wants to do advocacy, but many of the people here do, including many of our board members who joined us today. So to do advocacy, we have to be strong, and Holding Hope keeps supporting one another with Holding Hope and our other groups, Healing Heart, the grief support groups, is what keeps us strong. And what also keeps us strong is powerful voices that change the narrative. What Mom Stop the Harm is about is changing the narrative around substance use and moving towards evidence-based policy. And that is where David aligns with us. So I'm so excited to have David join us all the way from New York. And I have to say that David is has a family. He's a dad of 2 children. He has a dog, I understand, which is important to me. But being a good dad means that his daughter this morning, unfortunately, got hurt playing soccer. And you can see the dedication to the cause. He's not at the hospital. He's here speaking to us. But if his wife calls him, we will just chat amongst himself, and he will find out whatever news he has to find out. And hopefully she's well and all will be good, but it's good that she's being checked out. So The Weight of Air, a story of the lies about addiction and the truth about recovery, is the book that David wrote and we'll speak about. I had a chance to review and see an advanced copy. And it's just it's a powerful read. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming David and hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. It's so great to be here. I'm so in awe of everything that you guys do. We don't have anything like you in America. I mean, of course there are mom groups, but I mean, I'm always, as a former drug user and a son and a parent, I'm constantly aware of how easy it would have been for my mom to be in somebody else's shoes, and I never thought that I was gonna end up doing this stuff. This was all a secret until a couple of years ago. So it's really just overwhelming to have such support and to see the dedication and everything that you guys are doing. It's just so tragic what's going on out in the world. So my daughter in the soccer injury, it seems like her nose is broken and they're worried about some kind of bone in her eye socket. So I'm sorry if I'm a little, this might not be my best performance. If it's lousy, we'll refund your money, no problem. Anyway, all right. So basically I had struggled with depression from early childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 4. Mom took me to weekly therapy appointments. And even at that age, I mean, I remember lying in bed at night as a young kid and wishing for some kind of terminal illness. being in the car with my mom, and she would say, you know, why are you so sad? Don't you want to be happy? And, you know, long before I knew what depression was, I thought I was broken, because of course I didn't want to be sad, but I didn't know how not to be sad. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know what would make me happy. Like there was clearly something, you know, terribly wrong. So I kept all of my awful feelings inside. Turned out that all of my therapists figured out that I was depressed anyway. And in 5th grade, we had the DARE program here. Does everybody know what DARE is, right? Dare to keep kids off drugs, just say no, right? So we had this drug prevention assembly. I was in 5th grade, and a cop came in and he said, you can't drive a car if you drink alcohol. Pot makes you stupid, cocaine makes you angry. He told this story about some kid who took acid and thought he was an orange and peeled off his skin. I have never tried a hallucinogen because of that story. And then he said, the worst drug is heroin. It's a painkiller, and it's so strong that you don't have any feelings. And he said that like it was a bad thing. And I heard, this is the answer to all of my problems. So as I got older, like by the beginning of high school, my therapist had prescribed every conceivable antidepressant. 49% of depressed people are unresponsive to antidepressants. I'm one of those people. My friends were using pot and alcohol, like some kind of garnish for activities. I tried drinking. I got drunk once when I was 15. I haven't done that since because it was such a horrifying, miserable experience. And I smoked pot a handful of times, and it was the same thing. I mean, I don't like the feeling of being intoxicated. Reality, I didn't care to escape reality. I wanted reality to be okay. Like I was the problem. And so heroin in my neck of the woods, like half an hour outside of New York City, in the 90s, heroin might as well have been, weapons grade plutonium. It was impossible to find, and I was really looking for it, and I was increasingly depressed. And when I was like maybe 15, I made a deal with myself that like, antidepressants aren't working. I didn't like this other stuff. If heroin does what it's supposed to, then I don't care if it's illegal. I don't care how dangerous it is. I need that stuff to live. I'm committed. If it doesn't, then I'm going to drive into a tree. I didn't know what else to do. So it turned out that I had a friend who was on heroin, unbeknown to me. And he was unlike all the other drugs where, you couldn't go anywhere without somebody offering you a beer and pot and peer pressure. Rob, my friend Rob said, I wouldn't give this to my worst enemy. It's terrible, no way. And months went by that I would, see him and keep begging. And eventually I told him like, look, I'm so depressed right now. I'm going to kill myself if you don't give me some heroin. So you don't want my blood on your hands. And he agreed. And from that first hit, it was exactly what I needed. I felt like this is how normal people feel. This is how it feels to be normal. And I hadn't experienced that before. So for those first, for the first year, like I snorted heroin, and I got involved with Rob. Was older. He had some friends in the New York City nightclub scene. So I became a little bit of a club kid. I don't know if anybody knows about that scene. Michael Alec, Limelight, USA Tunnel, those clubs. Anyway, so these guys did everything to excess, but they hated heroin. They didn't want anybody who used heroin. They were on everything else, and it was really, kind of secret. Like I was ashamed of it. And so, but my tolerance quickly rendered a fear of needles impractical, and I started shooting up. My brother had he was very short, and he needed growth hormone. Don't tell anybody I told you that, because he's embarrassed by it. But so he had all these, needles, clean needles at the house. It was very easy, and at the time, like you couldn't find clean needles anywhere. So it felt like it was meant to be. But I hated the lifestyle. I I'm an honest person. And so lying about all this stuff was completely foreign to me and it felt awful. And all of the, getting beat up and ripped off and not knowing what you're getting and, buying a bag of it turns out that it's salt, it was all really awful. And so when I was 18, I decided I had tried to stop a bunch of times and it just didn't work. And then my mom went to Florida for a week. And so I told myself, I'm going to go to her house. I'm going to give Rob my car and all my money. Like I'm in a no exit, cold turkey kick situation. And this is just how it's going to be. And I deserve this. And, the self-hatred that I was trying to numb with the heroin, like it killed that self-hatred, but I found new reasons to hate myself as an addict. Anyway, so at some point in the middle of this thing, my cold turkey kick, that moment is where my book starts, and I need to find a way to get more comfortable talking about the book. People say a lot of great things about it, and I don't know. I feel like kind of a jerk being like, yeah, it's so great, everybody loves it. But anyway, so the book starts in that moment. So I've been using heroin for almost 3 years. And do you want me to read you a little bit? Yeah. All right. Here we go. Okay. Chapter 1. Rob was right. My plan is a fucking disaster. It made perfect sense yesterday. I'd kick here at Mom's house while she was in Florida. No distractions, no one around. Rob would have my car so I couldn't leave. This would be different, not like the other times I tried. And in just a few days, the whole mess would be behind me. But that was before the last hit of heroin raced out of every pore, before the puking, before my legs started twitching, before all the bones in my body felt like they were disintegrating. And I know it'll only get worse. Rob warned me. When you're shooting this much dope, he said, between urgent puffs on a crack pipe, you don't just decide to quit. I'll take you to a methadone clinic, or you can do a slow taper, or get on buprenorphine. No, I told him. I needed to do it my way. Now all I want is relief. This volume on the stereo is cranked. Johnny Rotten screams about blood and bile and bodies. I wipe vomit off my face with one of Mom's soft, fancy towels and stumble out of the bathroom and down the hall, past dozens of photographs in uniform frameless frames, most are of me and my brother, Daniel. Our mother is in some, our father is in none. I stop at a picture taken at a beach when I was 11 and Daniel was 8. He's smiling maniacally. I look blank. My lips pressed into a thin line. Before he left, Rob put 6 blue Klonopin on the kitchen counter. When you can't stand another second, he said, take one. I toss all 6 in my mouth and swallow. One comes up in a puddle of yellow and brown phlegm. It stays down when I chase it with ginger ale. I wait. Nothing happens. How long before I feel something? Outside snow is falling. Seconds take hours to pass. Doubled over, one arm wrapped around my stomach, I call the apartment Rob and I have shared since December. The phone rings and rings and rings. I try his beeper. We're sorry, the number is no longer in service. I slide down to the floor and light a cigarette. Squinting and swatting at tendrils of smoke, I remember the empty bags Rob threw in the trash after we shut up. On a heap of paper towels and coffee grinds, I spot 2 glassine envelopes with archaic hot stepper stamps, the closest you'll get to quality assurance on a $10 bag of heroin. Grabbing a steak knife, I split the bags and use the dull edge to scrape the creases. With the flat end of a syringe, I mix the powder and water in a spoon, and then I suck the concoction into the chamber. No lighter, no cooking, no cotton. My stomach clenches with anticipation. I wrap a belt around my upper arm and hold it in my teeth and make a fist. When the vein pops, I stab it with the needle and release the medicine into my bloodstream. Tension disappears from my body in less than a second. My insides begin to warm. My legs stop twitching. I can breathe again for the moment. The countdown to withdrawal resets. I'll try again when this wears off. I can do this, for fuck's sake. If I can't get through a day without a tiny speck of powder, I don't deserve to live. Next month, I'll be 19 or I'll be nothing. I turn off the stereo and collapse on the couch. On TV, a kid hits a baseball over the fence in a Little League game and his proud father charges into the field. Cut to the inside of a McDonald's where he tousles his son's hair and they enjoy a celebratory Happy Meal together. I close my eyes. All right, so that's how the book starts. So everyone in my life, from there, my parents found out. I ended up calling my father. I don't know why. I'd never taken Klonopin before, so I had no idea that like makes you crazy or whatever. So I called my father. I hadn't talked to him in a year. He comes over, and I didn't know this at the time, but like addiction is such a reactive thing. Like you look at colleges 4 years before anybody has to go to college, and with addiction, it seems like most people are just my kid's on drugs. This is an emergency. I got to do something about it right now. They call whoever they know, and who they say whatever they say, and they're like, "This is the best rehab in the world. You're going to go there," and that's that. So it so happened that my aunt Jo, my father's sister, had been on heroin at 20 years earlier, and she had been to Hazelden in Minnesota, and it was the best rehab in the world. So that's the only place that I could go. So I went to Hazelden, and my parents, I was so ashamed of the heroin to tell them why I started using. And they were too scared and horrified to ask. And I think that's a really important point that we miss in these conversations, because for years after I stopped, I would go around saying things like, "Oh, heroin is pure evil, it steals your soul," and all these kinds of things that I thought people wanted to hear. And when I'm doing that, I'm really invalidating my own reason for using it. And I wish that I had thought of that at the time, because I got to rehab, and the moment I walked in the door, it was an AA-based rehab. And I should probably just give you a little disclaimer that I'm not a person who has anything good to say about AA. I understand that it works for some people. I would never discourage anybody from working the steps if that sounds good. It's just not for me. Anyway. So when they started, telling me that I was in this nebulous figurative place called rock bottom, and God rescued me, and thank God I'm here. And if I don't put my life and will in God's hands and work the steps, that's the only way I'm going to achieve remission from this disease of addiction that I had no control over, but I had enough control to put my life and will in God's hands. I mean, I was 18 and very, very pragmatic and poking holes everywhere I saw. And they would refute my cynical pokery with, it works, or this is addict mentality, you're in denial, stuff like that. So they kept insisting that addiction was the problem. And I knew that that wasn't true. And so I took a lot of courage to tell my counselor that my addiction is a symptom. I'm very depressed. I would have no need for heroin if I wasn't so miserable. I don't want to be addicted to some dangerous illegal substance that costs a lot of money. But if we're focusing on, my addiction, that's secondary. It's like, let's treat the headache. You have a brain tumor. Now you're fine. So I very quickly made a lot of enemies there. I mean, it was in the 90s. I was one of maybe 3 kids that was on heroin. I didn't know what opioids were at the time. I just knew that. And so my counselor, Ron, who you will meet if you read my book, I don't want to give too much away, but he was, depression's an excuse. Addiction is the problem. This is addict mentality. You're making up excuses. Heroin has absolutely no medicinal value. There's no way that it's causing your pain. And the things that he was saying struck me as, later on, like, it's the exact opposite of everything we know to be, biological axioms of how opioids work. And the idea that, God was going to, God's been out of the disease curing business since like the Industrial Revolution, as far as I'm aware. I mean, bubonic plague, like everybody thought, you pray and you'll be healed. But, for like, it seems like the good yardstick is swap addiction with any other medical condition. And if it sounds like it's completely, fucking insane, then chances are it is. And it struck me as you know, when medical experts without medical credentials are pushing cures that involve magical thinking, you know, we call that quack medicine. I mean, that's the definition of quack medicine. And yet somehow, because addiction has been siloed off outside of the you know, science of medicine, it's perfectly acceptable. So perfectly rational people that if, you know, if an oncologist said like, yeah, no, you know, forget it, you don't need chemotherapy and surgery. You go to a, you know, support group and you pray and you ask God to help you. Like, that's the only way it's going to work. My mom had cancer a couple of times before I went to rehab. And so, you know, I just, like, it wasn't lining up. I actively chose to get addicted to heroin. My mom did not ask for cancer. God wants to help me, but he didn't do anything for my mom. Like, but I'm a bad person and she's not. So all of the moral shaming was very, you know, I mean, I felt that it wasn't true, and that, you know, there's a big difference obviously between, you know, faith and facts, but it was hard not to feel like you know, I felt like a bad person, and it was impossible not to, you know, internalize that stuff. And today, I mean, we just, you know, that kind of narrative of, you know, if your foot got chopped off, nobody in their right mind is going to say, oh yes, of course your foot hurts because you're taking morphine. You're not going to feel better until you stop taking the morphine that's causing all of your problems. You know, pain doesn't stop when, I mean, pain does not stop when you stop taking painkillers. And so this idea that's so, you know, messed up that we, you know, we know that that's not how these things work. And yet we somehow accept that it makes perfect sense. So they talked about sobriety and recovery. They were so interchangeable. And, you know, I thought of addiction as it's a symptom of, you know, my depression. And so the physical addiction of, I stick a bunch of heroin in my body. If I stop taking it, I'm going to get sick. I go through withdrawal and all of the misery, you know, a few days, I'm no longer physically addicted to heroin, but I still want it, right? So there's a physical component and a psychological component. And opioids are, you know, unlike any other type of substance or category of vice, it's the only thing that has a natural target in your brain. And it so happens to take hold with this, you know, ferocity, unlike anything else. So, you know, it's obviously the pull and the draw. I mean, there's significant dysfunctional activity that's been detected, you know, many years after people stop using. And especially, you know, we know, like, this idea that bad people are junkies. You know, why does that make sense more than people who are in pain use painkillers? You know, and they kept talking about I'm abusing these drugs, and it's like, you know, I mean, I realized I didn't have a prescription, but like, he told my mom that I would to get all the alcohol out of the house because I was going to drink anything when I was desperate enough for a high, including Purell, because that's what addicts do. And these guys knew that I had gotten drunk once. And I mean, you know, I started wondering years later, I think I'm probably maybe allergic to alcohol. But, you know, that didn't matter. Like, they're just going, you're addicted to everything. You're, you know, cross addicted and this way addicted. And it didn't make any sense to me. And so, you know, that made it very hard to get the kind of help that I needed, basically, because they're telling me the only cure is something that I know isn't going to work for me. And there's something terribly wrong with me if I don't see that. And they brainwashed my mom. I mean, I remember she was up there and I told her, you know, everything, how I felt. And she was just like, I understand. This all makes a lot of sense. Definitely. What if you're wrong? And so, you know, at the time, I just turned 19 in rehab. I was like, what, are you out of your mind? I mean, come on, this is, you got to trust me here. But as a parent today, I would do the same thing. I mean, I really understand. And so when I meet, you know, parents who lost a kid to overdose, I hear so many stories that, you know, they felt exactly the same way as my mom about all of this stuff. And then when it was too late, like, that was when they became aware that, you know, this isn't what I think it is. basically. And there's nothing more powerful than moms making that statement. And I've been looking for a way to, how do we get that message to moms who aren't in that spot? I mean, I certainly don't mean to be insensitive, but like my mom, I think she's better informed and more knowledgeable than your average person, just by virtue of being my mom. But she falls back into that Hazelden mentality, astonishingly easily. A couple of weeks ago, I went to this, it was an overdose awareness day thing, and I spoke, and there were a bunch of fentanyl overdoses in the nearby area the day before, and I told my mom about it. This is just a couple of weeks ago, and she said, it's like the COVID vaccine. It's going to save your life, and if you're not going to get it, then what? Like whatever happens to you, like that's your problem. And I was like, I don't think that's a fair analogy at all. And she's just going, look, I mean, if everybody knows drugs are dangerous. If you're going to use drugs, then, and you die, like you've got nobody to blame but yourself. So my mom drinks wine, every now and again with dinner, like a glass of wine. And I said to her, what if, suppose you poured yourself a glass of wine, and you can, 2 glasses of wine, like you'd be throwing up. So you probably can't drink like 33 glasses of wine in 1 glass of wine. But that's what would happen if there was, methanol or grain alcohol in your wine bottle. Well, why would that happen? That's not going to happen. Why wouldn't that happen? I'm getting it at a wine store. It's sealed. She goes through all of the reasons, like making my argument for me. And these arguments, it's amazing the way that people, like the argument against making drugs safer is the same as the argument for. I mean, it really comes down to the same thing. If drugs were safer, less people would die. So either you want less people to die or you don't. And this idea of, well, more people are going to use drugs if we make drugs legal and regulate them and all like that. It's like, I mean, look, I don't know about you, in America, in New York, you can buy beer at a gas station, and there's, liquor stores all over the place. Maybe it's just because I don't drink, but I don't load up on booze everywhere I go. I mean, any of you guys, show of hands, who goes out and buys alcohol every time it's available for sale? Anybody? No. Right. So, you have this conversation with people, and they're always like, well, I'm a bad example because I'm not going to do that. Well, surely you must know people who do. Who am I going to know that's going to do that? All right. Well, so, how psyched are you then if meth and heroin become legal, right? Like you'd start using it in a minute, wouldn't you? What are you talking about? And then, they of course can't name anybody who might even think about using these drugs if they were legal and regulated. And they make the point, perfectly for me that, legalization and regulation doesn't lead to widespread use. And then when you explain to them that it's not this, like our irrational fear of, oh my God, we don't want people using drugs. Like, I mean, I don't want my kids to use drugs either, but I know that kids don't always listen. And I know that I would really very much prefer that they don't die if that's possible. And it's, this moral kind of bullshit. Like I don't understand how anybody has a problem with harm reduction. I mean, you're not going to meet anybody who has a problem with bike helmets, gun locks, those little doodads you stick in the electrical sockets so your kids don't electrocute themselves. I'm quite certain that my children, when they were babies, did not feel encouraged to stick their hand in the electrical socket because those things were in there. And it's like saying like, well, bikes are the leading cause of bike accidents, so giving people helmets would be really stupid. And I wish that there was a way to get that message out, before it's too late for somebody, because my mom, I mean, she's aware now that she could have just as easily been in somebody else's shoes, and that I could have just as easily been, not made it. And for the longest time, I didn't know, like, what am I still doing here? I have one friend left who's still alive from 16 years of drug use. And, I know that the stuff that I'm doing out in the world and talking about this, it obviously it feels great to be able to do it, and I'm so happy to have a voice and to give a voice to others. But I'm certain that if I didn't make it, somebody else would be doing this. Somebody else's kid who never thought that they would be doing this kind of stuff and screaming about this out in the world would absolutely be doing it. There's no doubt in my mind. So Hazelden basically was a lesson in how to really set yourself as far off course as possible. So I went, after that, I basically, sobriety being the end all be all of it's the only way you're going to feel better, I tried to, I cobbled together these kind of stretches of sobriety, and I thought of myself as like a chronic pain person, right? So like chronic pain is 3 months of agony or whatever, discomfort, whatever it is. And so opioids, they opiate receptors regulate your physical pain and emotional well-being, and they don't know if you have a prescription, and they don't care what kind of pain you're killing. They flood your brain with serotonin and dopamine. And so the idea that like, no, depressed people, why would a depressed person take heroin? Like they're using it to get high. They're partying. It's just not true. I mean, we know today that I think it's something like 95% of illicit opioid users have some kind of mental health disorder, typically depression, either depression, trauma, or anxiety. Of that 95%, which is a crazy high number, 97% in rehab are treated for addiction only. Right? So 3% of the, not everybody goes to rehab. It's a very small chunk of the population, right? So 3% of the small percentage of people who have access to treatment are not treated for the actual problem. And I just,
Can we jump in? Tyler has a couple of questions from the audience for you.
Yeah,
there's been so much good information, and some questions have come up since you said it's good if you're interactive.
Yeah, definitely interrupt me whenever. I always feel like I'm rambling, so it's coming up.
All right, well, there's definitely lots of comments on just people sharing and connecting and saying thank you for being so open in your story and sharing. One of our questions is, what advice would you give parents as far as what or how to interact with their loved one?
That's a great question. All right, yeah, I mean, let's talk about what you guys want to talk about, because I get bored of my own stuff anyway. So like what should parents say to a kid who's on drugs or a relative that's on drugs? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, what kind of, like, thinking of the parent perspective and your experience, what advice would you give parents when they are dealing with this situation?
The first thing I would do is listen. I think we're missing a ton of that. We make a lot of assumptions that are based on stereotypes, and if I had told my parents why I was using heroin, I'm quite certain that their reaction would have been the same as my counselor in rehab. What do you like? That doesn't make any sense. Like, he's making excuses. He's not in pain. Like, what's he talking about? And so that conversation, if that had happened at the time, and we knew, and we had researched rehabs the way that we research colleges, it would have been very clear that a religious program that's predicated upon not doing the thing that is the only thing that makes you feel good is probably not the way to go. So of course, nobody wants to encourage their kid to use drugs. I totally get that. There's this JAMA study that came out last year about the modalities of treatment. And I want to say buprenorphine reduces the risk of overdose relapse and death by 79%. If you send your kid to rehab, a traditional 30-day, faith abstinence-based program, there's a very high percentage chance. It basically increases those risks in the inverse. However, if you do absolutely nothing but get a bunch of Narcan and beg your kid to just not use alone, the survival rate is significantly higher than going to rehab. And I'm sure that there's not a parent on the planet who's experiencing this for the first time where you tell that to them and they're going like, that makes a whole lot of sense. Of course, I will tell my kid to keep using drugs. Like, we have this irrational fear. I would tell them to just think about what's going on rationally. Don't react emotionally. Look at everything, take a step back, swap drugs and addiction for anything else, and see if it makes sense.
A couple more questions. The next is there a support program or group that you would recommend for those who also do not like programs like AA?
Yeah, there is. It is international. It's called Harm Reduction Works. I didn't know that they existed until a few months ago, and it's basically, it's how it sounds. It's harm reduction, and the idea of we're just not going to talk about drugs, and any drug conversation is terrible, and you shouldn't be on drugs, and let's not talk about it. Recovery, sobriety is not the same thing as recovery. So these guys take a more they have great sensitivity to reality. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Like, they're dealing with what's actually going on. It's great support. They have support for people who are using drugs. They have support for people who are not using drugs. They have, and like people who are in recovery. I mean, and there's no judgment. There's no, you've got to do this or else you're going to be dead in 6 months. I think that's great. I really don't know. I mean, I'm sure I could think of more if I really thought about it, but I think that's really the problem, because like AA, I totally get why the camaraderie is useful. I understand why the accountability is useful for some people, but it seems like it's really the group getting together with a group that's effective, and there really needs to be more, of that without the stigmatizing. I mean, in around my neck of the woods, you can't go to an AA meeting if you're on medically assisted treatment, which doesn't make sense to me at all. These guys are saying like, well, it's just as bad as heroin. I mean, okay, so after your next hip replacement surgery, ask for buprenorphine instead of morphine and let us know how it goes. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, one more thing with the parents. Don't be closed-minded to medically assisted treatment. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from parents over the past year where their kid was in rehab or is in some treatment, accessed buprenorphine somehow, told the parents, this is what I need, let's get some. And there's either they're going to a rehab or they're going to a sober living home, whatever it is, the parents are told by some kind of expert that buprenorphine and methadone are extensions of your kid's addiction. They're lying to you. This is dangerous. They're going to be dead. You got to get them off that stuff. It's drugs. They're high. Don't be irresponsible. And so they wean the kid off buprenorphine. And I mean, Jennifer Hornack, I don't know if anybody knows her. Her son Quincy was, he went to a sober living home and he was dead in 3 days. Because the low tolerance increases the risk of overdose, obviously. And with illicit drugs, that there's nothing more dangerous than abstinence. So, I mean, if I was a parent, I would do the exact opposite. I mean, my mom is like, why don't you get off that crap? You wouldn't say that to somebody if you wouldn't say that about insulin to a diabetic. Oh, well, your diabetes is clearly in check. When are you going to stop taking that life-saving insulin? So I would encourage everybody to explore that as well. All right.
Our next question is in regards to your mom, wondering, does your mom ever speak publicly about her experience?
She doesn't. Cancer became kind of her cause, and she's very involved with Gilda's Club. I think it's an international organization. It's Gilda Radner's, cancer support group. So she's very involved with that. She doesn't actually speak at all about this. I mean, other than with her friends. And I don't know if you would want her to. She knows, she understands the truth of what's actually going on here. I mean, she said to me, so rehab, my experience in rehab, the drugs that I told you about on the first page of my book, as far as everyone in my life was concerned, until 2 years ago, that was the last time I ever used drugs. So, you know, the entire book wouldn't exist. That includes my mom, my wife, my friends, like 100% of people I know. So my mom only recently started to, you know, understand. So I mean, I basically sprung all of this on her the night before my first newspaper article was published. And she, you know, to her credit, she was unbelievable. I mean, I gave her the book and I said, you've got 12 hours to read this before a newspaper article comes out. And I saw her the next day, and she gave me this pen. It's very fancy. I didn't have a book deal. I didn't have an agent. Like, you know, I'm just some guy who wrote a book. And she, you know, that's how confident she's always been in me. You know, you're going to need this for book signings, which was really, you know, so touching. But she doesn't, you know, she said to me after she read the book, like, I wish that you could have found an antidepressant that worked. Like, there's got to be something out there. And I said, I did. And she was like, well, what happened? Did you forget to take it every day? I would have called you every day. It would be my pleasure. No problem. You know, try it again. And I said, you know, I don't think I'm going to do that. And I remember to take it every day. It wasn't a problem. Like, you're out of your mind for not getting back on that stuff. Like, I don't understand. This is reckless. Like, she said I was being reckless by not taking this antidepressant. So she asked what it was, and I think everybody probably knows what I said. So I said heroin, and her face just, you know, all the color drains from it, and she looks aghast. And she's just like, you know, I can't believe you would say that. Like, you know, it's not a funny joke and whatever. And I was just like, look, you know, you didn't know that I was on heroin ever, even before, you know, when I was 18. Like, there were a couple of years where you had no idea. So it's not like some terrible stuff happened to me and there are all these negative consequences. So your problem really isn't with heroin, it's with the spelling and pronunciation of heroin. Because if I would have said Prozac, you would have been fine. You know, so she, I don't know, yeah.
So with having your books and I guess, you know, your fame evolving and such, as far as, you know, just spreading the word and sharing your story, the next question is wondering if your wife ever shares her experiences.
No. She is, you know, she was so gracious when I told her, and I'm really lucky for that, because I thought, you know, I mean, the fact is I deceived her for a very long time. So no matter how you feel about drugs and addiction, that's not a good thing to do. So she's uncomfortable with it, basically. I mean, I understand why, you know, nobody wants to be known as the person who was married to a guy for 18 years without knowing any of this stuff. So I think she, you know, I know she's proud of what I'm doing. But, you know, I think she would have been happier if I was still in private equity, where she could have been proud of my being a chief executive officer of some bullshit.
So we have a couple more questions, and just by chance, just because of doing research and such, I'm assuming for your book and that, what percentage of those who use substances also have ADHD?
That's a really good question. I don't know, but I could certainly find out. You know, I'm meeting a lot of people who had undiagnosed ADHD. I was never a big stimulants person. I mean, you know, I used cocaine a few times. And crack, but and I tried meth once, and it was not something I would ever want to do again. But I met this woman about a year ago who was 52, and she was a meth addict. And she said, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to say meth addict. She was a meth user, and she said that she was diagnosed with ADD in her 40s. And that everything made sense when that happened. And I think, you know, we look at, like, we think drugs are bad people use them and all like that. If we look at it as drugs are a coping mechanism, then it makes perfect sense that 100% of drug users are looking to cure something. You know, so ADHD, like, there's Adderall, there's all of that other stuff. It makes perfect sense that somebody without the resources to be diagnosed with ADHD would find any kind of stimulant and go, oh my God, this is exactly what I need. Nobody understands. So I'm sure it's, I would bet that the percentage, the opioid users, 95% thing, I wouldn't be surprised if it was that high, or damn near close for stimulant users.
Okay, our next question is, how do you find healthier ways to manage the underlying cause?
That's a really good, like me personally, or how would one?
I think, if we each speak to our personal experience, that's the best knowledge that we know. And then we can always interpret it from there as to what works best for each of us.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, obviously a very highly personal thing. I guess, I look at it as, like if someone, the people like OCD, you got to like turn the doorknob 77 times or else your cat's going to die. So you can stop turning the doorknob and then you're abstaining from that. But the underlying compulsion to turn the knob is obviously still there. So I feel like everybody, whether you have, that kind of thing or not, everybody has something that they do to, deal with the underlying issues. For me, I didn't know, for most of my life, the only surefire things were heroin and sex and girls. And I didn't have as much luck with sex and girls as the heroin. But those are the things obviously that we moralize, so nobody wants you to do any of that. Writing has always been my thing. In first grade, I wrote this autobiography, and I've wanted to be a writer ever since then. So, this book is my first published book, but I wrote like 7 novels and hundreds of short stories that I have very acute fear of failuritis, so nobody ever saw them. I started playing instruments a few years ago, guitars and whatever. I'm very, very bad, but it's fun. It's an interesting question because, we talk about this like genetic predisposition to addiction. And I have no way to prove this, but I think that it's completely bullshit because I've got this aunt and uncle, and he's a workaholic, and he, if you're a workaholic and you make $10,000 a year, like you're a fucking asshole. If you make $10 million a year, you're a hero. He works all the time. Good for him. So he's that guy. And then his wife is like an exerciseaholic. She's got an eating disorder, all kinds of eating disorder. Like she's very, very neurotic on top of that. And so their kids are not on drugs. They've never been drug users. If one of them went to rehab and somebody asked, is there a history of addiction in the family? My aunt and uncle would say no, and they'd be perfectly fine saying that. Like they're telling the truth. So, we look at the things that people do. I have this friend who, he's a little older than me. He gets up in the morning on weekends at like 4 o'clock in the morning to go to these bike rides that are, like 1,000 billion miles long, and he's always getting injured, and he never sees his kids, and it sounds horrifying. And if you put me on a stage with him and you said, told my exact story and his, and asked, who has the problem here? Everybody would say me. 100% of people would point to me. And the fact is, like, I wasn't on drugs when my kids were around, except for one thing. But I wasn't going to miss anything. So it's interesting how we define that, because everybody definitely has something that they do, whether we moralize it or not. I don't know if that answered the question. Sorry.
Our next question is, how do you make sure you can get a clean supply of heroin?
I don't know. I like to know what's out there. I'm relatively friendly-ish with a few drug dealers who are willing to share information with me. None of them have access to heroin that isn't cut with fentanyl. It comes that way. One of them gets his dope delivered by drone somewhere in Texas from Mexico. And he says that, the cartels or the traffickers, they loaded up with fentanyl before it even gets to them. Like, so I'm reasonably convinced that there's a very small, margin of the drug selling population that's adding the fentanyl to heroin. Like, it doesn't seem like actual heroin is coming into our country. And I mean, if you think about it, it's like we have this idea that, like, drug dealers are these bloodthirsty predators, and they just want to kill everybody, and because that's great for repeat business, and any halfway intelligent person knows that. It's a distribution model, right? So, like, if you're distributing orange juice, would you prefer to have the high profit margin, low volume orange juice that you can fill a ton of them in your truck and sell them for a bundle of money? Or would you prefer the giant barrels of orange juice that you make no money on and fill your truck with that? Like, you want, obviously, I mean, everybody wants that. So it makes perfect sense that, any drug trafficker is doing that. And we miss the idea that, like, it's a supply and demand issue. Like, if the cartels were selling shit sandwiches, this would not be a shit sandwich epidemic. I mean, I think we all know that. So we're a world in pain. Like, demand for painkillers isn't going to stop until our supply of pain is gone, and that's never going to happen. More the reason to try to identify some of this. I know, Dulf in Canada, I think you guys were involved with passing around free drugs. Is that right? Yes, right? No? Am I making that up?
Actually, Deb's here this morning, Deb Bailey. Deb, do you want to answer that question for David? Or Tracy? Yeah. Deb? Yeah.
There she is. Cute. Okay. Yes, we were involved in that action. Hi, David. Based on, I think Leslie Tracy had conversations with the Drug Users Liberation Front. And so we were involved with the action of giving safe supplies, and clearly a safe supply. Clearly on the packages were marked what it was. So it was heroin, meth, or cocaine. And the point of our doing it was to show that, you can give people safe supply. It's available. Now, where they got their safe supply, they find it tricky too. And so some of them, they don't really say, but some of them purchased it off of the dark web, and some of them got it from dealers that they know. But it was all tested and all pure. So
do you know if any of it was tested with a mass spectrometer?
I believe that's how they do test it.
Okay.
Because we have several of those in the city, so they had tested it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to add to that, David, sorry to interrupt. We as a board, we brought it to the board and to the Mom Stop the Harm board, and the board agreed. Last year, we were invited to do the same thing. And we kind of thought this is not in our image, there might be a little too radical for Mom Stop the Harm moms to give out clean drugs, right? Yeah. So, but this year, I mean, we're getting so frustrated with the systems not giving, implementing what they know to be right, that we just said, to hell with it, let's do it. And the board agreed. So I just wanted, it wasn't just three of us deciding, it was our board. And we know that some of our members, of our thousands of members that we have, might not agree with that. But it's time to get radical, and I'm sure you feel that way as well.
I do. I mean, it's definitely the right thing to do. And my views on this stuff have been my views since I was 16. They haven't really changed. I mean, they're evolved in a I have more information kind of a way. But I never understood why we wouldn't want to make drugs. I mean, people think alcohol is legal because it's safer. Alcohol is safer because it's legal. And the biggest danger of drugs is the unknown potency and not knowing what you're putting in your body. And so the idea that, like, nobody deserves to die for that. We're so afraid that drug use will increase if we have any kind of a safe supply. And nothing is going to change until our fear of increased drug use is less important than our horror that people are fucking dying every day. But this issue, I mean, when couple of years ago when everybody thought I was 24 years sober, and I first started talking about this stuff, I didn't really come right out and start screaming about legalization because I was afraid, and you know, I kind of dipped a toe in the pool, and once I started, I can't stop screaming about it. I mean, it's so horrifying, and I think a lot of I talk to a lot of people who are public figures in our space, and they're concerned about talking about it because for the same reason that you're the concerns of passing it up, but also these guys have some of them have like a well-documented history on social media of saying the drug war makes sense because drugs are so bad for you. So I don't know. I mean, in America, it's like I think 64% of voters want to end the drug war. But I look at it like, when you say to somebody, should drugs be legal? And they say no, and you ask them why, and they say more people are going to use drugs. Like, that's always the reason. People have to stop looking at that. Like, they hear the question, they don't hear the question. They hear, do you want more people to be using drugs? We're going to make them safer. And they go, fuck that. If they heard, do you want less people to die from drugs? Like, that's what they need to be hearing. And I don't know how to frame the question that way, but I mean, it's the same argument. I mean, any argument against legalization and regulation is an argument for death, like, period. So I don't know what it's going to take to change this, but like, this is unconscionable. This is the moral failure. Lawmakers know, I mean, their job is to make laws. Laws are made to protect us and keep us safe. They're not doing their job. I mean, the DEA can't keep the toxic drugs out of here. They won't let you get on methadone and buprenorphine. They won't give you access to a safe supply. They're killing people twice. If you look at it, and even people who agree with a lot of the stuff that I'm saying, like, I get a lot of questions of like, well, how would we do this? Like, it seems very, very complicated. We're just going to legalize drugs. Like, what kind of model is it going to be, and all of that kind of stuff? And doctors are going to prescribe it over. No, it's a fucking liquor store, but with drugs in it. Like, that's it. We need the safe injection sites because you don't know what you're injecting. Any moron can be a bartender because you're going to pour a shot of whatever and you know exactly what it is. You're not pouring. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought that I didn't know that it was methanol, in there. I mean, alcohol fatalities surged during Prohibition for the same reason. And if you ask somebody like, I'm gonna, would you like a drink? I've got these 2 glasses of alcohol. I'm not quite sure what either of them are, but they're alcohol. Nobody says that. And if you were to say to somebody, there's 2 glasses, methanol is in one, the other one is hard seltzer, I'm not sure which is which. Would you like to know which is which before you drink a potentially something that's gonna fucking kill you? And they all say yes, of course. I mean, why wouldn't I? Who wants to take those chances? Why should drug users take those chances? It's like, nobody wants their kids to use drugs, but wouldn't you prefer that they don't die? Like, I don't understand the disconnect there. So, and I'm just going to keep screaming about this. You guys have to tell me to shut up sometime.
Okay, we're going to go into our next question, and we're going to take it down a little bit because the question is, how do you talk about your ability to feel sad?
Me now?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun question. I kept everything inside for so long. I was so, ashamed and just felt awful about it. Maybe, it took many years of therapy for me to, kind of unpack the emotional baggage to understand even what was going on, and the idea that, depression is kind of a filter of how I see myself and the world. And so I couldn't have started to do this, any of this, talk about this, if I wasn't ready. And the biggest difference, I think, is, certainly the therapy, but like maybe 3 years ago, I used to be the person who, I think twice before I say anything, and I regret sending every email that I send, and it takes an hour to write a text because, what if I say the wrong thing? Very, very shy and insecure and like that. And something happened where I am not ashamed of anything anymore. I mean, like, I can't believe the things that I say sometimes about, how I'm feeling, how something makes me feel, all of these feelings that, I would hear other people say this stuff and I'm like, oh my God, you're admitting that out loud? I wish I could do that. And now it just comes right out. And so, I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm sure that it's certainly helpful that, I wrote this book that people seem to like. So I feel like, all right, well, I can say some stuff now. Hopefully they won't hate me. Anyway.
Well, know that there's been lots of comments of admiration and, thankfulness for you sharing today and just being so real, because we know this is a real topic, and being that additional voice, you just know that you're greatly appreciated in this crowd, most definitely. So our next question is, what supports do you have in your journey?
What supports do I have?
Yes.
Definitely my therapist is great. I'm still seeing you get to meet him at the end of this book, and he's still my guy. Buprenorphine is obviously, it didn't just save my life, it gave me my life. It was really like, I'm thrashing around in the ocean for many, many years, and then it was like a rowboat. So for the first time, I wasn't singularly focused on surviving. I'm able to focus on living. I have a few friends that are really, really great about everything and want to know what's going on. The support question is hard because I'm a very shy and insecure person. I think I'm much better on paper than like this kind of thing, or even talking to human people in the world. So I think that there's a lot more support that I don't take advantage of because I feel like such a burden. And I think I talk myself out of support. I feel this kind of overwhelming survivor's guilt a lot of the time. And then I feel very selfish when I mention it because, who am I to complain about that? I'm here. So, yeah, but I love hugs and, love. So, there you go.
I'm sure if we were in person, you would have lots of that being shared. Would probably even bend the rules on COVID and just make sure we're safely doing it. It's the mom feature, right? Our next question is, what do you hope for outcomes for this book?
Are you going to tell my publisher and PR people what I say? I didn't do this for fame or fortune. I really don't care if anybody buys this book. I care if people read it. If you want to steal it, that's fine. If you don't have the money for it, I'll send you a copy. I want it to be read and known about. I would love for it to lead to more, to open more doors, exactly like this. When I was, hiding all of this stuff, I didn't have a Twitter account. I wasn't out in the world, mingling with anybody or meeting anybody. So I just found out about Mom Stop the Harm not too long ago, Truth Farm, drug policy, all of these organizations and people. And there's there's so much out there. Sorry. Oh my God, my wife just sent a text and I got distracted. I totally spaced what we were talking about. I'm so sorry. That's
okay. It happens to all of us.
Sorry, the outcome. Right. Sorry. I'm very. I want people to read it, and it seems like. I haven't read any reviews, but people tell me what's going on with it, and it seems as if the reviews are overwhelmingly positive. So of course that's great. I'm aware of the sales, or I don't know how many books we've sold, but I'm aware that it's a bestseller. It's been the #1 bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories since it came out, and that's kind of astonishing to me because I'll I see Michael Pollan's book in a bookstore and I'll go I wonder if I'm ahead of him, and then everybody. So I'm not gonna lie, that feels really great because writing has always been my thing. So anytime somebody wants to say, you're a good writer, I love that, but that's also not the point. I want change. I wrote this book because I knew that I wasn't the exception. You know, opioid, like the stereotype is the exception, and the exception is the norm. And so I want people to know that this is what is actually going on, and I want to change laws. I want the book to be a vehicle for change. And I get reprimanded all the time for like not talking about the book when I'm doing interviews or whatever. I mean, like last week, one of the questions was, what books do I recommend in this genre? And I said, you know, the only 3 books that are worth reading, and none of them are mine. Yeah, I mean, I want to deflect as much attention from me as possible. I mean, I don't see what usefulness I have other than to stand on a soapbox and pass, you know, the megaphone to somebody else. I mean, and that's why, you know, knowing you guys is so great, and you know, all of the other organizations and people. Like I want to use whatever attention I can get to shine a spotlight on somebody else.
Perfect. All right. So with that, just a quick reminder that we will actually be doing a draw for anyone that's here towards the end of the session, that we will be doing a draw for David's book. So I know we have lots of conversation happening and people are getting very excited to get a copy of your book. We do have a combination of, you know, people that have read it and those that are very, you know, anticipating to be able to read it. But one question has come up is, in your book, do you talk about your recovery and hope?
And what? And hope?
Yes, recovery and hope. Do you share that perspective in your book?
Yeah, I do. The book starts in 1995 when I was 18, and it ends in 2008 when I was 32. So my recovery, you know, I didn't know the difference between. I thought sobriety and recovery were the same thing until I was at least 30. So the recovery, like the process of recovering, didn't start until, you know, the end. And there's a you know, pretty extensive you know, description about what happened. But the idea that, like, you know, buprenorphine was the medicine that I mean, depression is a degenerative biological illness. So without that, all of the, you know, notions about recovery are kind of immaterial. And the real thrust of the book is kind of the struggle to get to that, you know, because if it was an entire book about recovery, it's like, you know, I ate a piece of pizza today and, you know, life is good. And I did, it was like, not who cares, but like, that would be a very boring book. It's more of like the struggle to get to the recovery. And then, you know, I give you the recovery, but it's not, you know, 250 pages of recovery.
Our next is, did you ever test for fentanyl or the concentration of heroin?
No, I you know, I haven't, the last time I shot heroin was in 1999. So, you know, back then, there was no fentanyl in anything, but there was meat tenderizer that I, like a week after I started shooting up, we heard about a sous chef at a fancy restaurant whose arm blew up from shooting this meat tenderizer. So, you know, I don't know. I never had a reason to worry about fentanyl.
Another question has come up is, would you be willing to speak directly with individuals about your journey? Not necessarily just in the group, but just on that one-on-one basis.
Absolutely. I mean, that, you know, that's the other objective here, is to help people. So I'm available to anybody. I mean, like that's really, I get so many, you know, emails from people who want to, I respond to everything. And if there's some kind of emergent issue, I mean, like you know, I'll cancel whatever I have going on to be there for someone. But it's important to mention that, you know, I'm not a doctor. None of this is medical advice. I'm very careful to have well-researched facts. So I'm not going to say anything that's not 100% true and provable with reputable citations. And I think that, you know, that's useful for, you know, a lot of doctors are doctors, but they don't understand, they have no lived experience with it. So I understand why that's useful, but I don't want anybody to think that, like, I'm, you know, going to prescribe buprenorphine or tell them, you know, what to do. But I will definitely listen and share everything that I know. So please tell them, you know, send anybody share my contact information. You know, that's fine, really.
Perfect. And I know that was one of the questions that came up. So I'm sure we as an organization can share that with everyone that has attended. One of our next questions is, when your loved one stops communication, how do you break through to reconnect?
When, like, as a parent, how do you reconnect with the kid?
Yes.
You know, I've been struggling with that because everybody that I talk to is so different, and I get that question a lot. I mean, I realize this might be unpopular, but I think there is something to be said for accountability in the sense that if you're stealing from your parents, they're missing whatever it is that you stole. And you know, so I understand why, you know, when people say like it's a disease, it's no different than, you know, cancer. It's like, right, but cancer patients aren't going to break your window and you know, run out with your VCR. So I understand how parents, you know, kind of push kids away, and how kids make parents you know, lose their patience. But I think it really does come down to this is a serious medical problem. It's a complex medical problem, and at the end of the day, you don't want your kid, you know, there's nothing would be worse than losing your kid. So just having the kind of perspective that like they're not trying to hurt you or anybody, and make the effort, but not in a you know, this kind of judgmental way that people tend to get of, you know, like, we're so ashamed of what we're doing. I mean, we're ashamed of needing a foreign substance in order to function. We're ashamed of everything that we do to get drugs and all of our lying and everything. I mean, we just need, you know, compassion. So if you're not going to be compassionate, like, really don't talk to us. And I don't mean that in an insensitive way. I understand that parents are hurting, but like, you're the parent.
Our next question is, in your opinion, is safe supply best prescribed by a physician or better provided by community programs?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute there. What?
In your opinion, is safe supply best prescribed by a physician or provided by community programs?
I mean, I'm going to go back to the liquor store idea. I think there needs to be drugstores where you can buy drugs. I mean, you know, it's like alcohol can shut down every organ in your body. All other drugs combined can't do that. Alcohol can kill you in withdrawal. I mean, you know, opioid withdrawal is obviously brutal, but it's not going to kill you. So alcohol can kill you in like 100 billion more ways than any other drug. It's more addictive than any other drug. It's the single most dangerous, deadly thing you can put in your body. And we just sell it at, you know, at liquor stores. I mean, I can't get buprenorphine prescription, you know, 6 hours early, but I could go into the liquor store and buy enough booze to kill, you know, half my town. I think that's how it has to be. It's, you know, like the methadone clinic. We don't need methadone clinics. Methadone is in the fucking pharmacies. You don't want a methadone clinic in your town? Fine. Tell the drugstore to dispense it. I mean, you know, I think we're way overthinking this. People can, nobody's going out and saying, sell me the fentanyl that's going to kill me. You know, people, if you're using drugs, I mean, what I said before about, I thought I was being so careful and you know, this bag is 20% stronger than, or you know, 20 times stronger than the other one. That's what's killing people. So the idea that like, we can't be responsible with drugs, that's not the problem. Of course, there are going to be overdose fatalities. There are people die from, you know, alcohol overdose fatalities. You know, not as often, but like we have to trust people to put in their body what they're going to put in their body and know their own body well. I mean, you know, my God, we trust you to buy a fucking gun, and we go, please don't kill anybody. But we don't trust you to buy drugs that you can only hurt yourself. I mean, it's just stupid.
So we have, I know we're running short on time here. We have about 6 minutes left, but I do have 3 questions that have come up. And so one is, what is your take on rehab programs?
You know, rehabs, I think it's like 33% of rehabs have medically assisted treatment. I don't see the point in any kind of treatment that doesn't involve medication, unless you know, certain extenuating circumstances, like if you're 17 and you've been on, whatever opioids for a few months and you think you can be sober without it, like definitely. I mean, I would love to not have to take buprenorphine every day. So I get it, but a traditional 30-day, faith and abstinence program, like, I mean, it's, I feel like that we might as well say to cancer patients, like, skip the chemotherapy and the surgery. You just pray, and God's going to take care of you and your friends. Your friends are going to take care of you too. I mean, my mom would be dead right now if she did, her support group and skipped the science of medicine.
So we do have one question that actually comes from one of our loved ones that's also listening in today. And they would like to know is, how did you go about reinventing yourself? And this will be our last question today. So how did you go about reinventing yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm now, like, for the past couple of years, like, this is who I actually am. So it wasn't really a reinvention as much as it was a taking off my, this ridiculous costume that I, stuffed myself into for so long. I mean, and it was, the therapy, and I basically just had to take a leap at some point. I was in private equity for 20 years. I was a suit and tie and clean shaven, and nobody had any idea about my past. And, I hated it. And I ended up getting fired when I outed myself as a clinically depressed, person in recovery. There's no question as to why that happened. But that was really the best thing that could have happened to me. I had written the book. I didn't have an agent at the time. And when that stuff started to fall into place, I think it really gave me the confidence that somebody cares about what I'm talking about. Without that, there's no way that I would be doing this. So I think it's very, kind of chicken and eggish, but it was not. I was really surprised by the people who don't talk to me anymore, and the people who I found out that I could count on, who I didn't think they were. But it's really that it becomes a self-propelling thing, and like, I'm sure that other people think about, when I do like a something on Twitter and I get, a bunch of likes, it makes me want to come back and tweet again. If I have some wildly unpopular tweets, and like, then I of course take it personally and think like I'm the stupidest person in the world and I should never go on social media again. So like all of that kind of encouragement, I see somebody in the supermarket and they tell me, they read some review of whatever, and that feels good. The people, all the, like, I can't believe the people who know who I am, who I've looked up to for, so long, that like blurbed my book like that. All of that stuff, is what makes this possible. And seeing the results of, or, the impact, like there's nothing more powerful than when somebody calls or, gets in touch and they say, that I helped them to see something, or, whatever it was. Like, I mean, that this reinvention is, I'm just being me. So getting encouragement that me is good, like, that's good. Yeah. I mean, I'm fine if anybody has more questions. My wife hasn't called yet, so. Anyway.
Well, being respectful of time, I'm going to actually just turn it over to Petra now at this point, but thank you very much, David. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and please get in touch at any time. My website is davidposes.com. There's I'll send you a book if you can't otherwise get one. I mean, whatever. Like, please don't be shy. I love hearing from people, and I'm so grateful to be here and for this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, we are really grateful that you spoke to us this morning, that all the messages that you have provided are just amazing. And we are looking for a way to share the comments with you, because there are so many positive, encouraging comments, and so many questions, good questions that you might be interested in reviewing as well. So this has just been wonderful, David. It's encouraging to us. For me, as somebody who lost a child, as many of us have, and as somebody who has a child living in recovery, seeing you and you sharing your story, it gives us hope. hope and encouragement, and also strengthen our advocacy to continue fighting for what we know will make a difference. And we, as Moms Stop the Harm, we share your view that we say legally regulating is our focus, legally regulating substances based on the benefits and the harms. And there's so much what you said that that we would wholeheartedly agree with. So thank you for taking the time and for our format where we just throw questions at you and you give us really insightful, honest answers. That is really great. I know there are many among us who have lost a loved one and wish there are questions we could have asked them before it was too late. So you've done that for many of us here today. So that that means a lot to us as well. And one lucky person will walk away with one of your books in a moment. So we will draw that name. They have to be here still. Also want to point out to everybody that in the chat, you have the email addresses for Antoinette, where you can learn more about the Holding Hope Canada groups, and for Corinne, where you can learn more about Holding Hope BC. You can also contact us through the Holding Hope websites, where we have the website is brand new, so we're still working on it. We're building resources. We're adding provincial resources. So check it out. You can contact us. You've heard you can contact David via his website for those of you who want to touch base with David directly. So Tyler, who's our lucky winner of the book?
So our lucky winner today of David's book is Renee McLaughlin.
Is Renee still here?
Renee is still here. Camera's not on, but is still in the room.
Yeah.
Yay!
Okay. Hey, congratulations, Renee. So you'll Tyler will be in touch, and we'll either order it from a local independent bookstore near you, or a Canadian retailer that is not Amazon. Tyler will be in touch with you in regards to that. Congratulations. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. We will have a recording of this webinar. It'll be up. I would guess probably by next week, Wednesday, we'll have it up and on our YouTube channel. And you can also find recordings of other webinars there. And stay tuned. There will be more in the Holding Hope Connect series. As a teaser, one of my favorite physicians in Canada, who also prescribed safe supply and lives in Ontario, might be our next speaker. We are working on that. So everyone who came today, we will keep informed. We'll have that on our website, and as normal, we'll tweet, and I'll meet you on Twitter, David. I like all of your tweets. I have not come across one that I don't like. Sometimes I don't see them. Anyways, thank you also to our Stronger Together team for organizing this event. Jennifer for hosting, and Tyler for chairing, Antoinette and Corinne, who all helped make it happen. And thank you to Tracy Letts for suggesting it and getting in touch with David in the first place. So have a lovely Saturday, everyone. And yeah, David, maybe you want to join us for more Holding Hope Connects. Find out what physicians have to say about safe supply in the next round. Feel free. You're always invited. You can, and if you need some extra moms, you know where to find them.
Yeah. Oh, I just realized. Thank you so much. This is totally great. I just realized I was sending anything that I said in the chat went to just Shelley Cameron, or anyway.
Yeah. So, and we really hope that that your daughter is okay, and tell your wife that we all rally for her, and for allowing you to be here for us while she's in the hospital. So we do appreciate that sacrifice, and hope that everybody will be well and back on the field in no time flat.
Yeah. So yeah, no, they'll be fine. Thank you. I mean, there was no way I was going to miss this. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. So